Chapter 15. The Dog Vision. We stayed there, near the mouth of the tongue, till the end of the moon of making fat, June. Then the soldier chief told us that we could not be in that country because we had sold it, and it was not ours anymore. We had not sold it, but the soldiers took all the rest of our horses from us, and what guns we had, and loaded us on a big fireboat that carried us down the Yellowstone in the Missouri to Fort Yates. There, they unloaded us, and it was one of the new reservations they had made for the Lakota. Many of Sitting Bull's and Gall's people were there, but Gall and Sitting Bull were still in grandmother's land. The soldiers had taken the ponies away from all our people, and they said the Great Father in Washington would pay us for them. But if he ever did, I have not heard of it. I learned that my own band, the Oglalas, had been taken back to the country where we are now, and I decided that I ought to go there and perform my duty. So in the moon, when the plums are scarlet, September, I started with 3 others. We had to go afoot, and we only had bows and arrows for weapons. The Brules had been taken to the place where they are now on Rosebud Creek while I was in grandmother's land, and we set out first for where they were, camping 7 times on the way. One evening we crossed Smoky Earth River, the White, and camped on the south side. We camped by a plum thicket, and the plums were ripe. This is all we had to eat. There was a bluff close by, and I went up there alone and sat down with my face to where the sun was setting. It was a clear evening with no wind, and it seemed that everything was listening hard to hear something. While I was looking over there, I felt that somebody wanted to talk to me. So I stood up and began to sing the first song of my vision, the one that the 2 spirits had sung to me. Behold, a sacred voice is calling you. All over the sky, a sacred voice is calling. While I was singing this song, suddenly the 2 men of my vision were coming again out of the sunset, head first like arrows slanting down. They were pointing at me with their bows. Then they stopped and stood, raising their bows above their heads and looking at me. They said nothing, but I could feel what they wanted. It was that I should do my duty among the Oglalas with the power they had brought me in the vision. I stood there singing to them, and after a while, they turned around and went back into the sunset, head first like arrows flying. When I went back to our little camp by the plum thicket, the others there, who knew of my power and had heard me on the bluff, asked what I had seen up there. I told them I was only singing to some people I knew in the outer world. I stayed only a little while among the Brules on the Rosebud Creek, and then I came alone to White Clay Creek, where the Wazichus were building Pine Ridge Agency for the Oglalas. Our people called it the seat of Red Cloud, or the place where everything is disputed. There I stayed, and that winter, in the moon of the popping trees, I was 18 years old. That was a very hard winter, and it was just like one long night, me lying awake, waiting and waiting and waiting for daybreak. For now the thunder beings were like relatives to me, and they had gone away, and the frost came and would not come back until the grasses showed their tender faces again. Without them, I felt lost, and I was alone there among my people. Very few of them had seen the horse dance or knew anything about my vision and the power it gave me. They seemed heavy and dark, and they could not know that they were heavy and dark. I could feel them like a great burden upon me. But when I would go all through my vision again, I loved the burden and felt pity for my people. And now when I look about me, upon my people in despair, I feel like crying, and I wish my vision could have been given to a man more worthy. I wonder why it came to me, a pitiful old man who can do nothing. Men and women and children I have cured of sickness with the power the vision gave me, but my nation I could not help. If a man or woman or child dies, it does not matter long, for the nation lives on. It was the nation that was dying, and the vision was for the nation, but I had done nothing with it. When I was still young, I could feel the power all through me, and it seemed that with the whole outer world to help me, I could do anything. I had made a good start to fulfill my duty to the grandfathers, but I had much more to do, and so the winter was like a long night of waiting for the daybreak. When the grasses began to show their faces again, I was happy, for I could hear the thunder beings coming in the earth, and I could hear them saying, "It is time to do the work of your grandfathers." After the long winter of waiting, it was my first duty to go out lamenting. So, after the first rainstorm, I began to get ready. When going out to lament, it is necessary to choose a wise old medicine man who is quiet and generous to help. He must fill and offer the pipe to the 6 powers and to the 4-leggeds and the wings of the air, and he must go along to watch. There was a good and wise old medicine man by the name of Fewtails, who was glad to help me. First, he told me to fast 4 days, and I could only have water during that time. Then, after he had offered the pipe, I had to purify myself in a sweat lodge, which we made with willow boughs set in the ground and bent down to make a round top. Over this, we tied a bison robe. In the middle, we put hot stones, and when I was in there, Fewtails poured water on the stones. I sang to the spirits while I was in there, being purified. Then the old man rubbed me all over with sacred sage. He then braided my hair, and I was naked except that I had a bison robe to wrap around me while lamenting in the night. For although the days were warm, the nights were cold yet. All I carried was the sacred pipe. It is necessary to go far away from people to lament. So Fewtails and I started from Pine Ridge toward where we are now. We came to a high hill close to Grass Creek, which is just a little way west from here. There was nobody there but the old man and myself, and the sky and the earth. But the place was full of people, for the spirits were there. The sun was almost setting when we came to the hill, and the old man helped me make the place where I was to stand. We went to the highest point of the hill and made the ground there sacred by spreading sage upon it. Then Fewtails set a flowering stick in the middle of the place, and on the west, the north, the east, and the south sides of it, he placed offerings of red willow bark tied into little bundles with scarlet cloth. Fewtails now told me what I was to do so that the spirits would hear me and make clear my next duty. I was to stand in the middle, crying and praying for understanding. Then I was to advance from the center to the quarter of the west and mourn there a while. Then I was to back up to the center, and from there approach the quarter of the north, wailing and praying there, and so on, all around the circle. This I had to do all night long. It was time for me to begin lamenting, so Fewtails went away somewhere and left me there all alone on the hill with the spirits and the dying light. Standing in the center of the sacred place and facing the sunset, I began to cry. And while crying, I had to say, "O Great Spirit, accept my offerings. Oh, make me understand." As I was crying and saying this, there soared a spotted eagle from the west and whistled shrill and sat upon a pine tree east of me. I walked backwards to the center, and from there approached the north, crying and saying, "O Great Spirit, accept my offerings and make me understand." Then a chicken hawk came hovering and stopped upon the bush towards the south. I walked backwards to the center once again, and from there approached the east, crying and asking the Great Spirit to help me understand, and there came a black swallow flying all around me, singing, and stopped upon a bush not far away. Walking backwards to the center, I advanced upon the south. Until now, I had only been trying to weep, but now I really wept, and the tears ran down my face. For as I looked yonder toward the place whence comes the life of things, the nations hope, in the flowering tree. I thought of the days when my relatives, now dead, were living and young, and of Crazy Horse, who was our strength and would never come back to help us anymore. I cried very hard, and I thought it might be better if my crying would kill me. Then I could be in the outer world where nothing is ever in despair. And while I was crying, something was coming from the south. It looked like dust far off, but when it came closer, I saw it was a cloud of beautiful butterflies of all colors. They swarmed around me so thick that I could see nothing else. I walked backwards to the flowering stick again, and the spotted eagle on the pine tree spoke and said, "Behold, these are your people. They are in great difficulty, and you shall help them." Then I could hear all the butterflies that were swarming over me, and they were all making a pitiful, whimpering noise, as though they too were weeping. Then they all arose and flew back into the south. Now the chicken hawk spoke from its bush, and said, "Behold, your grandfathers shall come forth, and you shall hear them." Hearing this, I lifted up my eyes, and there was a big storm coming from the west. It was the Thunder Being Nation, and I could hear the neighing of horses and the sounding of great voices. It was very dark now, and all the roaring west was streaked fearfully with swift fire. And as I stood there looking, a vision broke out of the shouting blackness torn with fire, and I saw the two men who had come to me first in my great vision. They came head first like arrows slanting earthward from a long flight. And when they neared the ground, I could see a dust rising there, and out of the dust the heads of dogs were peeping. And suddenly I saw that the dust was the swarm of many-colored butterflies hovering all around and over the dogs. By now the two men were riding sorrel horses streaked with black lightning, and they charged with bows and arrows down upon the dogs, while the Thunder Beings cheered for them with roaring voices. Then suddenly the butterflies changed and were storm-driven swallows, swooping and whirling in a great cloud behind the charging riders. The first of these now plunged upon a dog's head and arose with it hanging bloody on his arrow point, while the whole west roared with cheering. And the second did the same, and the black west flashed and cheered again. Then as the two arose together, I saw that the dogs' heads had changed to the heads of Wazichus. And as I saw, a vision went out, and the storm was close upon me, terrible to see and roaring. I cried harder now than ever, for I was much afraid. The night was black about me and terrible with swift firing, and the sending of great voices and the roaring of the hail. And as I cried, I begged the grandfathers to pity me and spare me, and told them that I knew now what they wanted me to do on earth, and I would do it if I could. All at once, I was not afraid anymore, and I thought that if I was killed, probably I might be better off in the other world. So I lay down there in the center of the sacred place and offered the pipe again. Then I drew the bison robe over me and waited. All around me growled and roared the voices, and the hail was like the drums of many giants beating while the giants sang, "Hey-ya, hey!" No hail fell there in the sacred circle where I lay, or any rain. And when the storm was past, I raised my robe and listened, and in the stillness I could hear the rain floods singing in the branches all around me in the darkness, and far away to the eastward there were dying voices calling, "Hey-ya, hey!" The night was old by now, and soon I fell asleep. And as I slept, I saw my people sitting sad and troubled all around the sacred teepee, and there were many who were sick. And as I looked on them and wept, a strange light leaped upward from the ground close by, a light of many colors, sparkling with rays that touched the heavens. Then it was gone, and in the place from whence it sprang a herb was growing, and I saw the leaves it had. And as I was looking at the herb, so that I might not forget it, there was a voice that woke me, and it said, "Make haste, your people need you." I looked and saw the east was just beginning to turn white. Standing up, I faced the young light and began to mourn again and pray. Then the daybreak star came slowly, very beautiful and still. and all around it, there were clouds of baby faces smiling at me, the faces of young people not yet born. The stars about them now were beautiful with many colors, and beneath these there were the heads of men and women moving around, and birds were singing somewhere yonder, and there were horses nickering and blowing as they do when they are happy, and somewhere deer were rustling, and there were bison mooing too. When I could not see of this, I heard. I think I fell asleep again, for after a while I was startled by a voice that said, "Get up, I have come after you." I looked to see a spirit, but it was the good old man, Few Tails, standing over me, and now the sun was rising. So we brought the sacred pipe back home, and I went into the sweat lodge after offering the pipe to the 6 powers. When I was purified again, some very old men, who were good and wise, asked me to tell them what I had heard and seen. So after offering and smoking the sacred pipe again, I told it all to them, and they said I must perform the dog vision on earth to help the people, and because the people were discouraged and sad, I should do this with Hehokas, who are sacred fools, doing everything wrong or backwards to make the people laugh. They said they did not know, but I would be a great man, because not many men were called to see such visions. I must wait 20 days, they said, and then perform my duty. So I waited.